So what did I tell you, folks? I said it was a rapidly developing situation, and it has developed further. So we have some breaking news. In case you missed my earlier live stream, we talked about how Prigozhin, the leader of the Wagner group, was marching towards Moscow, and it was going to be an attempt to apparently remove Russia's military leadership, which he has been feuding with for months, or supposedly feuding with for months, and supposedly being outspoken against. So we're gonna give you the latest updates on that. Again, folks, please just let me know in the chat if there's any issue with my. Oh, I guess there's not. Let's say with my audio. There had been on the other stream. But yes, we have some breaking news on this, and this is going to be latest developments on what is happening in Russia. Just want to make sure that folks are actually in the stream here. Make sure there's no other technical issues. We had some technical issues this morning where it took 3 attempts to upload something. Don't know if anyone else is actually seeing this currently. If you're in the live chat, please let me know. There we go. Looks like we have a few people now. So, yeah, I wanted to give you the latest developments on what is happening in Russia. Again, this was really, it seemed as though it was a historical moment. It seemed as though there was a coup attempt happening. These Wagner mercenaries, up to 25,000 of them, were marching towards Moscow, and potentially could have been removing the top military leadership. But turns out things have changed a bit. So this is the latest statement by Prigozhin, and this came out just let's see, when was this? This was at 1:32 p.m. Eastern, so about an hour ago. A message from Prigozhin's press service. Quote, "We are very glad that at the moment we have managed to avoid bloodshed. We should not shoot at each other. We should destroy the armed forces of Ukraine and liberate the native Russian lands. PMC Wagner wanted to disband. We left on June 23rd for the March of Justice. In a day, we walked 200 kilometers before reaching Moscow. During this time, we have not shed a single drop of the blood of our fighters. Now is the moment when blood can be shed. Therefore, realizing the full responsibility for the fact that Russian blood will be shed on one of the sides, we turn our columns around and head back to the field camps as planned." So this is a reversal. This is clearly coming out saying that they will not continue the march towards Moscow. I'm going to read the report from the AP here. Wagner chief says he ordered his Russian mercenaries to halt march on Moscow and return to Ukraine. A rebellious mercenary commander said Saturday he ordered his mercenaries to halt their march on Moscow and retreat to field camps in Ukraine, appearing to defuse a dramatically escalating crisis that represented the most significant challenge to President Vladimir Putin in his more than 2 decades in power. Moscow had braced for the arrival of forces from the Wagner Group, a private army led by Yevgeny Prigozhin that has been fighting alongside regular Russian troops in Ukraine, by erecting checkpoints with armored vehicles and troops on the city's southern edge. Red Square was shut down, and the mayor urged motorists to stay off some roads. But Prigozhin announced that while his men were just 200 kilometers or 120 miles from Moscow, he decided to turn them back to avoid shedding Russian blood. He did not say whether the Kremlin responded to his demands to oust Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. There was no immediate comment from Putin's government. The announcement followed a statement from the office of Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, saying he had negotiated a deal with Prigozhin after discussing the issue with Putin. Prigozhin agreed to halt the advance in a proposed settlement, including security guarantees for Wagner troops, Lukashenko's office said, without elaborating. Putin had vowed harsh consequences for organizers of the armed uprising, led by his one-time protege who brought his forces out of Ukraine, seized a key military facility in southern Russia, and advanced towards Moscow. In a televised speech to the nation, Putin called the rebellion a betrayal and treason. All who prepared the rebellion will suffer inevitable punishment, Putin said. The armed forces and other government agencies have received the necessary orders. It wasn't immediately clear what concessions, if any, Putin may have made to persuade Prigozhin to halt his march. If he accedes to Prigozhin's demand to oust Shoigu, Prigozhin would emerge from the crisis as a clear winner and a major blow to Putin's authority. Not sure if I agree with that analysis. If Prigozhin agrees not to press the demand, Putin could award him with more lucrative government contracts like those on which he has built his fortune in the past. However, it would be awkward and politically damaging for Putin to backtrack after branding Prigozhin a backstabbing traitor. Some observers speculated that Prigozhin could make concessions such as putting the Wagner group under federal authority, or he could shift the force's activities back to Africa, where his mercenaries have been active in recent years. Early Saturday, Prigozhin's private army appeared to control the military headquarters in Rostov-on-Don, a 660 miles south of Moscow that runs Russian operations in Ukraine, Britain's Ministry of Defense said. Wagner troops and equipment were also in Lipetsk province, about 360 kilometers or 225 miles south of Moscow, where authorities were taking all necessary measures to ensure the safety of the population, said Regional Governor Igor Artamonov via telegram. Authorities declared a counter-terrorist regime in Moscow and its surrounding region, enhancing security and restricting some movements. On the southern outskirts, troops erected checkpoints, arranged sandbags, and set up machine guns. Crews dug up sections of highway to slow the march. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin warned that traffic could be restricted in parts of the capital and declared Monday a non-working day for most residents. The dramatic developments came exactly 16 months after Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Europe's largest conflict since World War II, which has killed tens of thousands, displaced millions, and reduced cities to rubble. Ukrainians hoped that Russian infighting would create opportunities for its army to take back territory seized by Russian forces. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Moscow was suffering full-scale weakness and Kiev was protecting Europe from the spread of Russian evil and chaos. The Federal Security Service, or FSB, called for Prigozhin's arrest Friday night and declared the armed rebellion. After he declared the armed rebellion, Prigozhin said earlier Saturday that his fighters would not surrender as we do not want the country to live on in corruption, deceit, and bureaucracy. Regarding the betrayal of the motherland, the president was deeply mistaken. We are patriots of our homeland, he said in an audio message on his Telegram channel. Prigozhin said he had 25,000 troops under his command and urged the army not to offer resistance. He posted video of himself at the military headquarters in Rostov-on-Don and claimed his forces had taken control of the airfield and other military facilities in the city without any deaths or even a single gunshot. Other videos on social media showed military vehicles, including tanks, on the street. The rebellion came as Russia is fighting the toughest battle for its future, Putin said, with the West piling sanctions on Moscow and arming Ukraine. The entire military, economic, and information machine of the West is waged against us, Putin said. State-controlled TV networks led their newscasts with Putin's statement and reported the tense situation in Rostov-on-Don. Some showed social media videos of residents denouncing Wagner troops. Broadcasters also carried statements from top officials and lawmakers voicing support for Putin and condemning Prigozhin. In announcing the rebellion, Prigozhin said he wanted to punish Shoigu after he accused Russian government forces of attacking Wagner camps in Ukraine with rockets, helicopter gunships, and artillery. He claimed that a huge number of our comrades got killed. Prigozhin said his forces shot down a Russian military helicopter that fired on a civilian convoy, but there was no independent confirmation. He also alleged that General Valery Gerasimov chief of the general staff, ordered the attacks following a meeting with Shoigu in Rostov, where they decided to destroy the military contractor. The defense ministry denied attacking the Wagner camps. The 62-year-old Prigozhin, a former convict, has long ties to the Russian leader and won lucrative Kremlin catering contracts and earned him the nickname Putin Chef. He gained attention in the U.S. when he and a dozen other Russian nationals were charged with operating a covert social media campaign aimed at fomenting discord ahead of Donald Trump's 2016 presidential election victory. He formed the Wagner mercenary group, which sent military contractors to Libya, Syria, several African countries, and eventually Ukraine. After Putin's address, in which he called for unity, officials sought to reiterate their allegiance to the Kremlin and urged Prigozhin to back down. This is a tough one. Vyacheslav Volodin, Speaker of the lower house of parliament, said lawmakers stand for the consolidation of forces and support Putin. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova echoed that, saying in a Telegram post, "We have one commander-in-chief, not two, not three, one." Ramzan Kadyrov, the strongman leader of the Chechnya region who used to side with Prigozhin in his criticism of the military, also expressed his full support of Putin's every word. "The mutiny needs to be suppressed," Kadyrov said. Even with the confrontation seemingly diffused, it appeared likely to further hinder Moscow's war effort as Kiev's forces probed Russia's defenses in the initial stages of a counteroffensive. Wagner forces have played a crucial role, capturing the eastern city of Bakhmut, an area where the bloodiest and longest battles have taken place. But Prigozhin has increasingly criticized the military brass, accusing it of incompetence and starving his troops of munitions. Prigozhin's actions could have significant implications for the war. Orysia Lechevich, the head of the Ukraine Forum at the Chatham House think tank in London, said the infighting could create confusion and potential division among Russian military forces. The Russian troops in Ukraine may well now be operating in a vacuum without clear military instructions and doubts, blah, blah, blah. So, is there anything else useful here? Western countries monitor developments closely. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken spoke with his counterparts in other G7 countries and the European Union Foreign Affairs representative. His spokesman said, adding that Blinken reiterated support by the United States for Ukraine will not change. Latvia and Estonia, two NATO countries that border Russia, said they were increasing security at their borders. The Kremlin said Putin spoke by phone with leaders of Turkey, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan about the events. Although there was speculation that Putin had left Moscow, spokesperson Dmitry Peskov denied it. So that's the official AP write-up. As you can see, it's a little biased in some ways. But that's effectively a breakdown of what has been happening over the last 24 hours. So on the subject of the Ukrainian advancement, I just wanted to read this tweet here, which is just from a few hours ago, saying, counteroffensive of the armed forces of Ukraine, Oreskovsky sector situation as of 1700, June 24th, 2023. While the whole world is watching the rebellion of the head of Wagner PMC, Yevgeny Prigozhin, and the march of justice to Moscow, active hostilities continue at the front, and the most intense pressure falls on the Orekhovsky area. Ukrainian formations advance 1.5 kilometers north of Rabotino, taking landings. Reinforcements of special forces from the 22nd Detachment of the Special Forces and the 45th Detachment of the Special Forces of the Airborne Forces were transferred to the site to help the infantry units, which under pressure from the enemy were forced to retreat. In the event that the Russian troops succeeded in regrouping and seizing the initiative, it is possible to close the advancing enemy groups into a cauldron north of Rabotino. At least the Russian Federation Armed Forces have enough forces and means in the sector. According to the Archangel of Spetsnaz, a concentration of enemy infantry was revealed near Nestorenkia after a successful fire defeat and Ukrainian formations were dispersed. Five Hats are still partly in the Great in the gray zone, partly under the control of the enemy. There is no confident control of the Russian Federation armed forces over the settlement. The Russian infantry is working on enemy reinforcements trying to move forward. So, again, you can see that as this was happening, the so far completely failed Ukrainian counteroffensive was continuing on. And Ukraine, as would be expected, was trying to, take advantage of the situation as it was unfolding in Russia and start advancing south and east. So that's what we're seeing here. But as this quickly has turned around now, and Prigozhin is now going, and Wagner is going to be returning to Ukraine, you have to wonder how those advancements, what's going to happen with them. So just the latest from War Monitor, and again, I really recommend following. It's at War Monitors, and then the name is War Monitor. So this is the latest here 4 minutes ago. Military police vehicles appear near the headquarters of the Southern Military District in Rostov. RIA Novosti correspondent reports. Flight bomber reports that 12 Russian pilots were killed today by Wagner anti-aircraft systems. 1 Tu-22 airborne now. So, and here they're showing the Wagner troops leaving Rostov. They're getting hugs, getting handshakes from the people there. Rostov Air, we are all one people, and we are fighting with one external enemy. We believe in the Russian people and our president. So that's the Rostov arena. Lukashenko informed Putin of outcome of talks with Prigozhin. Putin and Lukashenko spoke by phone for a second time this evening. The blockades are now being reopened. So they dug these blockades in the road, and now they're filling them back in. Wagner and Rostov, boys, let's load up, let's go home. Translation is dodgy, but RIA just said that Wagner are packing up their equipment in Rostov. So, clearly, it seems as though they are redeploying back to Ukraine. And it really just, it kind of makes you wonder, right? Like, was this all a big fake out? Was this a psyop conducted by Russia? You know, in my last live stream earlier today, I discussed a few possible scenarios, and that was one of the possible scenarios, that this was a psyop by Russia, that Prigozhin and Putin really were still basically on the same page, and that they were trying to hide something, or in this case, it seems as though trying to get Ukraine to continue with their counteroffensive, and this may indeed be a trap for those Ukrainian forces now that Wagner is returning to the battlefields in Ukraine. So that is a possibility of what has happened here. It reminded me a lot of professional wrestling in the 1990s. I don't know if any of you people watch WCW, but there was a long-standing rivalry back in the 90s between two factions of the New World Order stable. And Hulk Hogan was the leader of one of those factions, and Kevin Nash was the leader of the other. And this big rivalry culminated in a world title match where Hulk Hogan ended up just poking Kevin Nash, and Nash laid down. Hogan won the world title, and the New World Order ended up reuniting. And they went from there to attack Bill Goldberg, who was their enemy. So this, kind of reminded me a little bit of that. I kind of wonder if this was, a big fake out in order to trap the Ukrainian forces. That is a possibility of what we saw here. So time will tell. We'll see if that really was the case. But for now, it seems as though this crisis has been averted. It seems as though, again, they are unifying and seem to have some kind of agreement, although we don't really know what the details of that agreement are. But again, it seems as though there is unity at the moment after this supposed crisis in Russia. So we'll see how this plays out on the battlefield. Again, the Ukrainian counteroffensive already was, pretty disappointing from a Western perspective, and even Western politicians and Western media outlets have been admitting that it has been a slow go and it's been difficult, and all of that kind of vernacular that they've placed around it. Disappointing probably has been a term that's been used as well. But really, when you see NATO supplied tanks burning on the field, it just speaks to how poorly things have been going. Unless, again, if you think about it from another perspective, from the standpoint of weapons manufacturers, maybe it's a good thing that Russia is blowing up these vehicles, because you can keep juicing the taxpayers for more money to keep creating more of those vehicles, keep putting them out in the field with no air support, and keep having Russia blow up more. And effectively having that being just a money laundering operation to get as much tax money from the American public and from NATO countries' citizenry as possible. So that's the latest update, folks. Again, this has all developed very quickly. We saw this start about 24 hours ago. It was a tense night. I think Elon Musk had tweeted that he didn't sleep last night because he was just watching these developments. And again, at the moment, it seems as though all is well inside of Russia. Again, we'll see how this plays out in Ukraine. Again, you always have the looming threat of false flag attacks. We've seen that again and again and again. And we heard that recently with all of this talk around nuclear weapons, and if again, Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal were introducing this measure that the United States would consider the use of nuclear weapons inside of Ukraine as an attack by Russia on NATO, and that would trigger Article 5. So it's still an incredibly dangerous scenario, and we still could be facing the likelihood of nuclear war. But again, at least this crisis inside of Russia seems to either have been a complete psyop, or if not, then it seems to have been resolved. So that's the latest. And but since I did have you back here again, and if any of you folks wanted to share any of your own thoughts about this, please do submit a super chat, and I'll be happy to read that. If you have any kind of takes on this, again, the whole thing just seemed weird from the beginning, right? Because why would Prigozhin obviously had been saying these things for months and months, but why at this point in the war, when you finally have this Ukrainian counteroffensive that has been talked about for months, and you have this finally happen, and it's very successful from a Russian standpoint, where you seemingly defeat the counteroffensive, why then would Prigozhin march against Moscow? It didn't really make much sense. So this may have just been, this may have been some chess, really. Could have been just a real fake out. So let me know your thoughts. Anybody, if you want to submit super chats. I did just want to talk about one other news article, because this is something that I have been saying, and now finally, it's being reported that the resumption of student loan payments this fall is going to create the recession that we've continually heard about. And, this is something that I thought was really unfortunate with the way that the debt ceiling was kind of pushed through at the last minute. And personally, I think it was really done on purpose, where McCarthy and Biden waited until the last possible second to reach this debt ceiling deal. Part of the debt ceiling deal is that student loan payments would resume. But they waited until the last possible second and then pushed it through Congress, where there was no time for debate, no time to read the bill. Everybody has to vote on it right now, as is. Can't make any kind of amendments, can't change it. You have to either pass it or we're going to go off a financial cliff. So they passed this, and what this means is that the 45 million Americans who have not been paying student loan payments and not had interest on their debt since the start of the pandemic over 3 years ago, this fall, They're going to all have their student loans resume. They're going to have the interest on their debt resume. And, we've heard a lot of pushback, especially from conservatives, of, why don't you just pay your damn loans? You took out the loans, it's your responsibility. Well, the thing is, we live in an economy, and it's not a zero-sum game. When people have to start paying a new monthly expense, when 45 million people have to start taking on a new monthly expense that they haven't had in over 3 years, that has an effect on the economy. That has an effect on the customers who are shopping at your store, at your place of employment. So this is from Fox News, confirming what I've been saying, that when these loans do resume, this is going to crash the economy, because you can't have 1 out of 5 adults in the United States take on a new monthly payment that they haven't had in 3.5 years, all at the same time. That is going to have a collective ramification on the American economy. And, you can say whatever you want about student loan forgiveness, or, these people should just be repaying it, or the cost of college, or whatever your perspective is. It's just an objective fact that when you have 45 million people take on a new monthly payment, that means there's less money in the economy. You're exacerbating that deflation that the Federal Reserve is trying to push for. And you're really going to have a liquidity crisis in the United States. So this is how Fox News reported it last week. Student loan payments could slam big name retailers this fall. Target, Nordstrom face big hit from student loan payments resuming this fall. For more than 3 years, federal student loan borrowers have not had to make monthly payments, but that pandemic era pause is coming to an end this fall, setting up a financial shock for millions of Americans and the big name stores where they shop. About 44 million borrowers in the U.S. were affected by the payment pause, which initially began in March 2020, again, over 3 years ago, at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Biden administration extended the pause for the 8th time in November, with its broader debt forgiveness plan tied up in legal limbo, but will not do so again as part of the bipartisan debt ceiling deal approved by Congress. Payments, which are set to resume on August 30th, can be substantial. The average monthly bill hovers between $200 and $299 per person, although it is even higher for some borrowers, according to the most recent Federal Reserve data. Collectively, borrowers are set to resume paying about $10 billion per month. $10 billion per month is now going to go from those 44 million people towards their student loans. That's $10 billion a month being sucked out of the consumer spending, out of the economy. The resumption of these payments will likely force households to cut back on spending in other areas, particularly retail, according to a note from UBS analyst Jay Soul. Quote, inflation and the overall macro environment has caused U.S. consumers to defer many discretionary purchases over the past 18 months, Soul wrote in the note. Apparel has proven to be the category consumers defer most often. Soul added, interestingly, market research of the 1,392 U.S. consumers with student loans show that this trend is even more pronounced among this group. We believe this indicates student loan consumers will reduce spending on apparel in a big way when they have to start paying off their student loan debt. A number of brands and retailers could be negatively affected by the spending reduction, including American Eagle Outfitters, Carter's, Crocs, Foot Locker, Canada Goose, Gap, Nordstrom, Nike, Steve Madden, Under Armour, and Victoria's Secret, according to UBS. UBS is not alone in its warning of the coming ice age for retail. JP Morgan analyst Chris Horvers said that Target sales could face a hit once student loan repayments begin in early September. That's because Target caters to millennials, which carries a large share of student loan debt. Quote, Target over-indexes to the millennial customer, and should student loan payments come back on, the company is more exposed than others in our coverage, Hovers wrote in the note. Buy-side client expectations are in $6 to $8 million per month consumer outflow range should this happen, per our conversations, which represents a potential 1 to 2 point comparable headwind to retail spending. The return of student loan payments comes as President Biden's broader student loan forgiveness plan remains in legal limbo. President Biden's executive order cancels $10,000 in student loan debt for individual borrowers who earned less than $125,000 in either 2020 or 2021, or married couples who made less than $250,000 annually in those same years. If a qualifying borrower also received a Pell Grant while enrolled in school, they are eligible for up to $20,000 in debt forgiveness. The plan faced at least 6 lawsuits after it was rolled out, and the Supreme Court is currently weighing the constitutionality of the proposal. If the Biden administration wins the case, an estimated 8 million federal student loan borrowers would receive forgiveness automatically under the one-time cancellation policy. However, borrowers can opt out if they prefer. And then I just get a white screen here. So again, folks, this is what I've been saying for for a while now. Actually, was it a year ago, 2 years ago? I had Chuck Rosansky on the show, who is the owner of Mile High Comics, because one theory that I've had is that a lot of the people who haven't been paying student loans, and also, folks who got some of this extra cash during COVID, that money was being used, not just on consumer spending and not just driving inflation, but also it was being used to up the value of collectibles like comic books, like sports cards, like cryptocurrency. And, we've seen those values of those assets already plummet significantly, in large part because of inflation and also the rise of interest rates. But now we're going to see, again, 44 million Americans take on a new monthly payment. So that is going to have catastrophic consequences for the economy. I think this article is actually portraying it a bit too lightly, saying it's just going to be apparel or these certain big box retailers. It's going to be everybody. It's going to be everybody. One out of five Americans has student loan debt. That's going to affect every single industry, and it's going to have a snowball effect where it's going to, it's going to double impact each industry. So again, these people who just seem to have this view that, you people with student loans, you just need to repay that debt. That might be a great moral position, but again, the reality is this is going to affect you, whether you took out student loan debt or not. And you may be against the government writing it off. You may be against, taxpayers being on the line or whatever. It's going to affect your business. It's going to affect your customers. And what's going to happen when your employer has less income coming in? They're going to start making cuts. You might be one of those cuts. So, there may be no perfect solution here, but student loan forgiveness, or at least extending this pause, perhaps forever, extending this pause may be the better solution, not just for the people with student loan debt, but for everybody in the entire economy. So that's just my 2 cents there. Looks as though we did not get any super chats for this stream. Again, folks, I appreciated the super chats on the previous stream. I just wanted to mention too, last night I did an interview with Misty Winston on TNT Radio. That was a live interview, audio only. But the recording is not currently up. Yeah, this is her previous episode, but it will be up on TNT Radio. So, check that out if you missed it yesterday. Also, just listen to her show regularly. She is and follow her on Twitter as well. She is a really, thoughtful, observant analyst, and she has great guests on this show. So please do check out her show. Follow Misty Winston on Twitter. Her handle is Sarcasm Stardust. And again, folks, I appreciate everybody who submitted super chats earlier. If you'd like to support the show, please do go to patreon.com/Primo Radical. I'm a patron there. And if you're a patron, you can submit questions to all of my guests. Again, I'm hoping to have somebody from the Gray Zone on soon, or Also, I'd like to have an analyst on to talk about all of these developments inside of Russia over the last 24 hours. But thanks again, folks, for listening to both the live streams today. I appreciate it. And not sure when I'll be back, but I will be back again. So until